Megan fell in love again and enthusiastically told her sister Ruby how amazing and perfect Scott was. But Ruby had her doubts. From a young age, Megan had been looking for her soulmate, going through one fiancé after another, and Scott was clearly not the last. She and her sister rented a studio apartment, and while all Ruby's thoughts were occupied with her studies in college, Megan, who had taken a job as a salesperson, was concerned only with her personal life. Megan often made fun of the fact that Ruby sat for days and nights at her books. One day she gave her valuable advice from her point of view. "You don't know anything about life, Ruby. If you spend all your time at home, you'll never find a man for yourself. Megan, I know what to do with my life, and if I am destined to a man, he'll find me for sure." Megan laughed back, and each of the sisters stuck to her own opinion. One day, Ruby returned from her studies and saw a man in their one-room apartment, walking around in his underwear. The girl was embarrassed, but Megan, looking out of the kitchen, cheerfully reported, "Meet Scott. He's going to live with us now." Ruby became indignant. She had no idea how they would all live together in the one room, but Megan didn't see any problem with that. According to her, her boyfriend was having trouble with housing, and Ruby should be patient for a while because Megan could not kick her future husband out on the street. But eventually it was Ruby who had to leave. The girl tried to get used to the new tenant for 2 months, but she could not. Scott behaved disgustingly. He was not ashamed of Ruby's presence, sometimes took a shower with the door open, never cleaned up after himself, never made his bed, threw his things around, and left behind a mountain of dirty dishes. Ruby could not stand the mess, so she often cleaned up after him. But when he started molesting Ruby, she was unable to stand it anymore and told everything to Megan. But unexpectedly, her sister sided with her boyfriend, accusing Ruby of trying to steal him. Ruby was out of her mind with shock and resentment. She packed her things and left home for the night. She walked through the city at night, dragging her heavy bag, which mainly contained books and textbooks. Once at the threshold of the dormitory, the girl tried to get inside, but the manager of the hostel was gone, and the guard flatly refused to let her in, and no appeals had any effect on him. But then suddenly a young man, Eric, who turned out to be the dormitory manager's nephew, came up to her. "Well, why are you arguing?" said the man with a smile. "Is it possible to leave such a beauty in the street? I'll call my uncle now and arrange everything." And indeed, Eric called and got permission for Ruby to stay overnight in the dormitory. He also helped to get a room here for her in short time. Ruby was grateful to the man for his participation. From that moment on, the girl's life began to get better. Since then, Ruby and Eric almost never parted, spent all their spare time together, and were happy. Soon, Eric graduated from the university, and he was drafted into the army. Before his departure, they agreed that Ruby would definitely wait for him. One day, Megan came to the dormitory where Ruby lived. In all this time, the sisters had not seen each other once. Megan was in tears, and Ruby saw that her sister was in her last month of pregnancy. "Scott dumped me, can you imagine?" cried Megan. "I wanted to tie him to me and got pregnant, and he, when he found out about the baby, just left. And not just left, but also took some of our things, and now I don't know what to do. I don't want this baby. I won't be able to love him." "Don't say that. You will be able to. The baby is not guilty of anything." Ruby tried to put her sister on the right track. They argued for a long time, but Ruby still managed to convince her sister not to do anything bad. When it was time to give birth, Megan went to the maternity hospital. But when Ruby came to visit her, the doctor told her that she had just run away and left her baby, who would be sent to an orphanage now. Ruby went to her sister's apartment, but she was not there. She did not come back until the next morning. Megan was drunk and acting defiantly. Ruby tried to talk sense into her and persuade her to come take the child from the hospital. But her sister was only rude and wouldn't listen. Ruby decided to postpone a serious conversation for when Megan was sober. She somehow got her to bed, and when she came home from her studies, she found a note on the table from Megan. She wrote that she was leaving for good and there was no need to look for her. Ruby cried, and then, after calming down a bit, she decided to take the baby with her. At first, she lived with the baby in the apartment where she and her sister used to live. But Ruby could not cope with her studies because of the baby, and after a while she finally had to take a sabbatical. She and the baby returned to her parents in the village. Seeing their unmarried daughter with a baby in her arms, her mother and father were upset at first. But when they saw the sweet face of their grandson Tommy, they shed tears and forgave their daughter. Ruby could not tell her parents that Tommy was Megan's son because they had always scolded her sister for her frivolous nature. Time passed, Tommy grew up, and Ruby grew increasingly attached to the boy every day. She switched to distance learning and went into the city only for exams. One day, Ruby saw Eric not far from her college, and he was hugging a young woman. Of course, after he had returned from the army, he tried to call Ruby, but she had changed her number, and he just resigned himself to the fact that he had lost her forever. At one moment, Eric's eyes met Ruby's, and she was embarrassed and hurried to hide behind the doors of her college. Her heart was pounding so that it seemed to jump out of her chest, and tears came to her eyes. She realized that she herself had ruined everything, but remembering Tommy's cute face, she wiped away her tears and, clenching her teeth, went to the exam. Having passed her exams, Ruby returned to the village, but when she entered the house, she was surprised to see her parents and Eric with Tommy in his arms in the living room. "What are you doing here?" asked Ruby dazedly. "I came after you. I also talked to your parents." Ruby's father looked at Eric guiltily and grinned. It turned out that, originally, he had almost kicked Eric out the door because he thought he was Tommy's father who had abandoned Ruby with a baby. But when Eric explained everything, her parents welcomed him as their son. Eric turned to Ruby and apologized to her for not coming sooner. When he returned from the army, he was told that his girlfriend had given birth and left for the country. At first, he was very angry, but accidentally meeting her again, he realized that he could not live without her. Ruby decided not to hide the truth anymore. She told everyone how Tommy appeared in her life and who his real mother was. A little more time passed, and Eric and Ruby got married. They had 2 daughters, but Eric loved his eldest son Tommy no less and was happy to have such a big family. One day, during a walk in the park, they were approached by an unkempt-looking woman with a hood over her head. She smelled of alcohol and looked disgusting. Ruby hurriedly took the children away, and Eric stopped and gave the woman some money. She thanked him, but gazed after Ruby, her sister. Yes, that was Megan, or rather what she had become. She sighed heavily and, clutching the bills in her dirty fist, wandered toward the store to buy another round of alcohol, to drink, and to forget all that she had done.